Welcome to Helping Organizations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Lori Mihalich-Levin on the show. Good afternoon and good morning, Lori, to you.
Julian, good afternoon. And to me, good morning.
Yes.
And good afternoon to you, sir.
Yeah, good to see you and glad we're having a conversation today. So you're a US-based lawyer and the founder and CEO of Mindful Return, which supports parents on their return to work after having children. Also the author of the book, Back to Work After Baby, How to Plan and Navigate a Mindful Return from Maternity Leave. And you also co-host a podcast called Parents at Work. So lots of experiences, and people will probably get a sense and feeling what we're going to talk about today just on the basis of what I've just introduced you as. We'll be exploring about helping working parents thrive. Before we get into that, I'd love to know what do you love about what you do, Lori?
Julian, I love the opportunity to connect working parents to one another and to feel connected to a broader working parent community. I felt very, very isolated in the early days of parenthood and working parenthood. Felt like I was the only one in the entire world sitting on my floor crying alone in the struggle. And it turns out that I wasn't. And I just love helping people go, oh my gosh, me too, and allowing them to calm their nervous systems because they know they're not the only one suffering.
Wow. So just diving into that really, and it'd be interesting, I think, for the audience to understand in how you got where you got to really, and sort of what were the challenges that you faced returning to work, having children, and I'm sure people are going to identify with some of this, a lot of this, I'm sure. So just take me from your story really of how you got to A, set this company up, and B, write books about it.
Sure. So I'd like to say that I wear three main hats in life. One is I'm mom to a now 9 and 11 and a half year old. So the story I'm about to tell is about a decade old now. Two, I'm a healthcare regulatory lawyer. And three, I now run this Mindful Return program. But after I had my first child and I returned to work after parental leave, I found it challenging in part because said child would not take a bottle. And so my internal dialogue was, if I go back to work, he's going to starve and die because he won't take a bottle. And that was a whole journey in and of itself to figure out. I had baby number 2 years after baby number 1. And I am certain that I had some undiagnosed postpartum anxiety. Nobody was sleeping in our house. Things were going off the rails. And I looked around to find resources that could help me as a new working parent. And I found tons of two things. One, snarky advice about how I should not put a photo of my baby on my desk or my colleagues wouldn't take me seriously, or I might leak on my shirt if I'm pumping at work. That was not helpful. And two, I found lots of baby related resources, how to puree baby food and massage my baby and all the good stuff that we need related to babies. But I couldn't find anything out there about the personal and professional identity transition that I was going through and the struggle that I was facing. And so basically I set out to create what I wished had existed for myself when I went back to work after my 2 boys.
So you combined having the baby bits and then integrating that into a work context. And so what did you come up with in terms of specific challenges when you went back to work? I mean, you talked about some of them already, but what were those specific challenges that, I mean, people talk about, I'm not a mom, I'm a dad. And it might be slightly different, but the whole sort of guilt thing, you said about you're thinking that your son's not going to survive because he's not going to eat,
right?
Feeling overwhelmed, feeling you've missed out because you've been away perhaps for 12 months or so. I don't know how long you were off for, but
not in the US, Julian, not in the US.
Okay. But there's a whole host of stuff you get in this transition, and I think people forget it is a transition, isn't it? This is not just going back to
not an event. Right. So I'd like to say that the return to work after parental leave is not an event. It is a transition process. It's almost a year-long process. And some of the challenges that I faced, in addition to the guilt about the bottle, were the transition to childcare. Learning to trust a stranger with my baby was a big deal. The petri dish that is the childcare, right, where all the kids are bringing all the germs, and the kids are getting sick, and the teachers are getting sick, and that relates to the work schedule because it creates a really sort of volatile and unpredictable work situation where you don't know if you're going to be able to go to sleep tonight and wake up and go to work tomorrow morning, or if you're going to be dealing with a baby who has a fever and is barfing all over you. some of the other challenges included like the end of the day schedule. I had a lot of guilt walking out at the end of a day at a very defined time. I used to be the one who just stayed until whatever hour I needed to. And daycare closed at 5:45 p.m. and they charged us $10 per minute if we were late. And so you had to make the metro to leave. So I really had that dialogue running through my head of like, comparison is the thief of joy. I need to do me. And it took me a long time to learn sort of those messages for myself. I think ramping back up into work and feeling like I wasn't constantly behind for the first couple of months that I was back. There are strategies and things that one can do so that one does not feel like one has to read every single email that you missed during the time that you're away, for example. And I think how a manager treats you when you come back can really affect your experience as well. So, I mean, I had some people at my office who were fantastic about my return and others who basically said, I don't see what the problem is, just like get back into it. Your life is the same.
So just going on your own experience, we'll come to the manager's piece and the company bit later on, because I think it's important to understand how companies can help the employees who've had parental leave, or even, not just we're talking mums, we're talking dads as well in this context. It's both, and some of them, even new dads who've not had parental leave as such, there's still a transition going on. So as a mum, and obviously you've wrote about this, what are your sort of key learnings of if you were to do it again? You've done it twice, I know.
Yeah.
I know, and so if you do it again, what are the ways of managing that transition? And that's probably even before, I presume, you even go off from work. There's probably a whole process here involved.
Indeed, yes. To the extent you can have a written plan that's iterated with your manager and talks about your expectations and return and how much you'll be communicated with and all that, I think actually sitting down and having a conversation that gets documented in a written document can be really, really helpful. In terms of what I learned and, what I would tell myself to do another time or tell a past version of myself, I sort of put the advice into 4 buckets, and maybe I'll just pick out one thing from each of the 4 buckets. But the first bucket is really to get your head in a calmer place. So sort of a mindful mindset for returning to work, which, one small strategy is to just find one time of the day that you are alone and can center yourself. And, simple practice. But for me, it was the shower. No tiny person was attached to me while I was taking a shower to get ready for work. And so that was sort of like a multitasking of mindfulness. And the second piece is really to think through a lot of the logistics as you're going into leave and as you're planning to come back out. One logistical piece that really helped me was to have a phase into childcare and a phase in back to work. And those things did not coincide with one another, which was intentional. So having a couple of days when you can take baby to the childcare setting before you have to go back into an office can be really helpful. Third bucket is thinking about a leave and return through a leadership lens. And, I at the time thought, well, I'm a parent now, so I'm less of an employee and I'm it's a detraction from, that's not even the right word, parenthood as a detractor from my career. And in reality, I was able to sort of flip that narrative on its head and say, no, parenthood is giving me skills that are making me a better leader at work. And, really trying to, I would have told myself to focus on those skills and those competencies instead of focusing on the fact that I had an end of day time boundary, for example. The fourth thing that I would have told myself to do was to find my people sooner. I wouldn't have sat alone crying on the kitchen floor by myself. I would have connected to other working parents sooner. I think that's what made me become a serial founder of working parent groups at 2 different employers, because I really feel deeply and strongly that when we find our people, we're better able to support one another and just better able to succeed in whatever we're doing.
Very helpful advice there. 4 key things. The mindfulness, I like that. That's really good to get in that place of being with yourself in the shower and just sort of switching off and engaging within yourself. The practical stuff is quite key, isn't it? And I say not doing too much at once, isn't it? Because I've got 4 children,
Mhm.
and just I know the first one almost is like a thing that blows your world apart, and then it gets sort of easier. And obviously, I wasn't full time. My wife was full time mum, but it's still the whole logistics is quite a challenge. Interesting on the leadership aspect. Did you find? So I presume were you in a leadership role when you went off on?
The
having babies?
first parental leave I took, I was not, and the second parental leave that I took, I was.
Okay.
And so like I had been promoted in between the 2 children, and clearly my work didn't suffer by the fact that I had the first child, but my confidence was shaken
I was
by
going
the
to say,
children.
did it affect confidence? Because that's what I hear a lot
Absolutely,
of is
yes.
you have a break and things have moved on at work, and no matter how short that break is, you just sort of seem to miss out, and then you're then managing and trying to got this whole thing outside of work that's very new,
Yes.
and you got to leave work at certain times. So how did you deal with that confidence piece? Because I think that's quite an important one to understand a bit more of.
Yeah, I think it has evolved over the decade that I've been a parent now. And there are some things that I think you just keep practicing and you get more confident at because, heck, it didn't fall apart for the past couple of years. So I must be doing it okay. I really tried to, and one thing that I work with folks in the Mindful Return program on is reminding them of challenges and things that you've been through in the past that were also hard to navigate, and recalling that you can do those hard things. And so I think a confidence boost for me was really saying, oh, like I went to law school, I studied for a bar exam, I was able to manage hard things before. I see other people around me. I think confidence also helped by looking and finding other examples of working parents who are making it work, and talking to them about how they were navigating it and saying, oh, I can do that too. It doesn't have to look like the perfect Instagram page or whatever, or Pinterest scene. It's going to be messy, and I can keep showing up one day after another after another. I think really it is showing up and proving to yourself that you can do it day after day.
Yeah, that's interesting. And the community piece, I think that's it's not just for parents. I think we all need to build those communities around us and networks outside of work that can foster that confidence, but also provide places where we can just scream, shout, moan, whinge, but also get some input and advice, and perhaps in a nice way, gentle challenge as well of how we're doing things, but provide that support network. And I think as much as whether you're a working parent, I think we all need to adopt those support networks around us to really help us through life, because life's tough and it's not to be done on our own, really. I don't think it's not really. And so just going from I suppose almost more of a, well, you actually alluded to it, the fact that you believe that if you're a parent, you've got some additional skills here. And we need to, I guess, sort of bring a bit of there's something you're doing outside of work, whether you're involved in a charity or you're looking after a new child, some skills come with that. And I think we don't sort of tap into that. What have you found in the communities you've been talking to and your own experience of how that really affects positively with organizations?
Sure. So there's a neuroscientist at Yale Medical School named Ruth Feldblum who has discovered that the 1 year following the birth of one's child is the 1 year that the brain is the most neuroplastic in all of adulthood. And that's true if you're a mother or a father, as long as you're intimately involved in the care of the child. And so,
it's not just the mother.
it's not just the mother. It could be a grandparent if they're really engaged all the time. And so our brains are literally being rewired through parenthood, and they're giving us what my friend and colleague Amy Henderson likes to call career critical skills. And these things include the ability to prioritize amazingly well, and courage and empathy and problem solving, conflict resolution. I mean, the ability to meet the needs of demanding clients who can't articulate their needs particularly clearly is one of them that often comes to mind for me. So I think there are a whole host of things that, to put it in layman's terms, just make you grow up really quickly whenever you have a baby. And you're able to be efficient and prioritize in ways that you weren't before, because you know what your values are, you're clear on what matters, and you get done in a day what you need to get done. So
that's really interesting. And it's interesting that the neuroplasticity of your brain, what do they think causes that? Have they got a theory behind that?
I wouldn't want to speculate on what Dr. Feldman was thinking there, but I mean, everything about how you have to act in your day to keep another human being alive is probably what causes us to have to make all these
So
changes.
so looking after somebody, other human that can't
Right.
really look after themselves, and also they say that doing new things and challenging things stimulates and rewires our brains. And the
Yes.
fact that when you've got a baby, there's a huge amount daily, and obviously it peters off as the year goes by, but certainly the first weeks or so, you've got a massive steep learning curve of everything's new, everything's challenging. And I guess that might be the whole rewiring going on.
It's the rewiring. It's also what causes the massive shake of confidence, I think, because here you are, like, competent professional, you know how to do your job, you go to work every day, and then you come and have this baby and you suddenly realize that you have absolutely no idea what is going on in your life, and that is very jarring for someone who considers themselves to be a competent human being. Yeah,
there's almost it's like a transfer, isn't it? You go to a new area where you feel out of your comfort zone and floundering, and then you go back and you think that's going to continue, I guess, and that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yet you haven't lost any of your skills. That's what I try to keep reminding new parents and their managers, is that all the skills you had before you became a parent are also still there. Your brain might be a little bit foggy because you may not have slept as much as previously. And all the stuff you were able to do before is still there. You haven't lost that.
And in fact, it's as you say, flipping this and creating a new narrative is saying, actually, you've got more additional skills. In fact, you're a better employee now. You've got more capability of making decisions, more value driven, handle a lot more in terms of capacity because of the nature of what you're going through. So I think it's trying to make the more positive. And actually, when you're pushing yourself and stretching yourself, it will feel difficult. It will feel a bit uncomfortable, actually. So, and that reason why. So turning to the employer in terms of helping working parents, whether that's the mum or the dad, to, I guess, grow and thrive with an organization. What have you found in either your own experience or what you've talked with other people in your communities of what organizations are doing and what's really helpful to do as an organization to really embrace it? And it's not just about, I guess, giving certain leave, but just, I guess, what things have you found?
Yeah, so I think there are two buckets, right? There are the policies that really matter, and then there's the culture and how the policies get implemented. And I think with respect to policies, having paid leave, making sure that it is offered in a gender neutral way to all parents and also an inclusive way to everyone, no matter how you came to parenthood, really matters. And also, I think having flexibility, particularly around an on-ramp and off-ramp, can be really helpful. Phasing back in, for example, over the first couple of months so that it's not, full on 100% from day one can help to make that transition a lot more smooth. From the cultural perspective, however, I think there's a lot that companies, that employers can do that doesn't have anything to do with the policies or the money. I think, first of all, acknowledging that this is a transition period, that the parents want to be loyal and want to be in this for the long haul, and communicating to them that you believe in them for the long haul can really help. I think taking their pulse on how they're feeling before they go out, trying to schedule meetings between managers and direct reports on the way out and then on the way back in, viewing it, as I mentioned before, as a long transition process. So not having one check-in when the person comes back, but having monthly check-ins for the first, call it 6 months or 9 months that the person is coming back. There are supports that employers can provide around backup childcare. I know that was really helpful for me in the early days. A way to fill in the gaps whenever a caregiver is sick or the child gets sick, for example. And giving them tools and communities that they can connect with so that they feel supported and mentored through the process can really help as well. There's a lot employers can do to change the narrative. If I can offer just sort of one wording change too, it is often the case that there are cultural differences between women taking leave and men taking leave. And I truly believe that until we get to a place where care and parental leave can be degendered, that we will continue to face challenges in promoting women in the workplace. And so if you're a manager and you have a father who has just come up to you and said, "Hey, I'm going to become a dad," please don't say to him, "Are you planning to take any leave?" Please say to him, "When are you planning to take a leave?" It just sort of gently reformats the way that you're setting an expectation that he will be going out and becoming a caregiver, and that's a normal thing to do.
Yes, I think that the narratives needs to change, and I think also the support, certainly from a women perspective, because obviously the whole given as a reason why the women don't make more the top is because the whole going off a parental leave or was used against them in that sense.
Yeah.
And how I guess as employees can we combat that, almost that gender difference of high performers, I guess, and board level individuals that are more diverse rather than being very male and white in that sense.
Yes, and one way of combating it is to when you degender who goes on leave, then it becomes less of a question of, oh, I'm going to, feel as though this woman isn't committed, because all people who have children are, going to be going out on leave. I think also reminding people of the humanity of taking a leave can really help. For example, there are people on teams who get annoyed that someone else is going out on leave, right? And you can tell them that first, well, one, it's a normal thing to do to have a human child, but second of all, it's a normal thing to do to have to take care of someone in life or take care of yourself in life, and that you might have to take a leave. You might get sick and have to go out for 6 months, or your partner or your parent might need to go out. And so it's not about parental leave and quote unquote choosing to take this time, but rather it's a normal human thing to do to have to take leave, period. I think can help destigmatize it a bit.
Yeah, I think it's taking away from just parental leave, as you say. It could be your parents that are unwell, and you need to take some time out to look after them. And it's companies that are far more compassionate and empathetic in that way, isn't it, in terms of seeing the whole picture. And it's interesting because I think the more you are that way, the more you get back in spades from that individual. If you are more relaxed about them going home at 5 o'clock because they've got some childcare, they'll often pick up on things later on anyway, not that they should do, but also you have a lot more of their loyalty in the daytime. And
absolutely.
And as you say, I do believe certainly working mums in the context of the experience I've had are incredibly efficient and very good at what they do, because they know they've got a deadline to finish by. And I think there's something good about that and healthy. In fact, we should all have a bit more of that, really. And I think we'd be a lot more productive rather than just working through till 6, 7 o'clock at nights. So what else can we do to, I guess, change the narrative on all this and ensure that we're embracing when people take some time out, and to encourage their career progression still, and also to try and get that sort of confidence back, because it's a massive transition. And I think whoever you are, you're the mum or the dad, it's a massive transition in your life. And I think it's probably not even notice of how big it is until you go through it yourself. What are the sort of ways of, I suppose, building that confidence back again?
Yeah. So I have two thoughts on this. One is to normalize conversations about all of these topics, right? To make it so that, I'm scared to raise the question of how she's doing. Or, in the US, a lot of women are pumping whenever they go back to work, because we get such a short amount of leave that people are often pumping milk when they go back, and normalizing the conversation. It's a normal thing to do to pump milk because babies need to eat, because all humans need to eat, and allowing the people to have the space to feel comfortable to talk about these issues, I think really matters. The second piece is, I think, a really important one, which is to stop making assumptions about what any individual person wants or needs or is, planning to do. So, for example, there's sort of a chronic problem of managers making assumptions that whenever a woman comes back from leave, she won't want that next big, huge project, or she's not going to want to travel, for example. And that may be the furthest thing from the truth. Ambition is one of the career critical skills that parenthood actually develops. And it may be that she really wants to dig into that next project. I have new moms who I work with who return after leave and say, I don't want to go back just to sit at a desk. If I'm going to go back, I want to be doing something meaningful. And if I'm going to be away from my baby, it needs to be worth it to me. And so if you are a manager or a people leader, to take the approach that you don't know what this individual wants or needs, and to ask the question, to keep all the options open and available, and don't write people off simply because they've become a caregiver.
Well, that's a massive help, really, because I think that there's a huge assumption, isn't it, that actually that person's not going to be able to do this because of they've got a child now. But actually, you might not know that. Just ask the question. They might say no, we may say yes, but it's to not assume. That's really helpful, actually. I think that's my experience is probably what has been definitely assumed and talked of when somebody comes back, and that's not helpful. Have you found since COVID and people been working more remote and hybrid, has that helped this situation, or do you think it's made it more difficult? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think it has clearly helped in the department of getting rid of commutes and being able to participate in beginning and end of day drop off and pick up and things like that in a less complicated way. It has very much helped the brand new moms who are nursing their babies, who don't have to pump milk throughout the day because baby can be there and feeding. Two ways in which it has been more challenging. One is, I think it can amplify the guilt to have the child in the next room when you're trying to work and you're really not deciding, but trying to feel like you do need to be in two places at once. And I've talked to a lot of parents who have purchased noise canceling headphones during the pandemic because they've needed to work and sort of be able to focus on their role in their job. The other thing I think that the jury is still out about whether there is going to be sort of ongoing repercussions for people who choose to spend more time working remotely than going into the office, because decisions get made in the office, and the cool kids club might still be happening in the office, and it might be the parents of younger children who are choosing the remote option when it's available. So I think companies and organizations need to be mindful of not creating sort of two classes of citizens within an organization, the butt in chair variety, and then the remote team. So I think the jury's still out, Julian.
Yeah, and I think it's still out in terms of anybody within the organization, in terms of the whole remote hybrid working. I think, as you said, there's some real positives and flexibilities with it that can really help create the whole sort of childcare stuff. And if somebody's sick, they can sort of, as in if the child's sick, they can still sort of do a little bit of work and that type of thing. But I'm not entirely convinced if those in the office might be benefiting more from those who are not in the office, depending on the company. And I think it's for companies to really watch out for that. Definitely. Thank you for your time today, Lori. Thank you for your insights. It's been really helpful. And I think it's good to challenge the narrative and to make sure people think differently about it, and to really help working parents. They can bring a lot more to the party. In fact, I sound that their brains are in a much better place and got more capability. So encourage it and really foster it even more so, really. So I think it's create a culture where we embrace it, and we obviously got to embrace all aspects of life, but certainly the working parent. So appreciate your time. If people want to connect with you and get in touch with you, what is the best way of doing that?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on, Julian. And also thank you for elevating this really important subject and creating the space to have this conversation. If they want to connect with me, mindfulreturn.com is the best website to go to. You can feel free to link in with me, Lori Mihalich-Levin, like our page on LinkedIn. I co-host the Parents at Work podcast and do a Tuesday tip for working parents on Instagram. So you can follow at Mindful Return. And then you can find a copy of my book, Back to Work After Baby, on Amazon and all the places one finds literature.
Brilliant. We'll put all those links within the show notes after this. Thank you for your time again. Much appreciated,
Thank
Lori.
you, Julian. Have a great day.